Awakened Imagination. Inspired by Neville Goddard. Written and published by Audible Aria. Originally published in 1954. Chapter 1. Who is your imagination? I rest not from my great task, to open the eternal worlds, to open the immortal eyes of man inwards into the worlds of thought, into eternity, ever expanding in the bosom of God, the human imagination. Blake, Jerusalem, Chapter 1, Plate 5, lines 18 to 20. Some words, after being used for so long, gather so many different meanings that they lose their clarity. One such word is imagination. People use this word for many things, even when the ideas contradict each other. For instance, we tell someone to use their imagination when their thinking feels limited or stuck. But then we might dismiss their ideas as pure imagination, suggesting they're unrealistic. If someone is overly jealous or suspicious, we might say they are a victim of their imagination, meaning their thoughts aren't true. Yet we also praise someone as a man of imagination, meaning they are highly creative. This shows how the word has no clear, consistent meaning. Even the dictionary doesn't clarify it much. It describes imagination as the ability to picture things in the mind or create something unreal or imagined, like a hallucination, a false or irrational belief, and mental planning or designing. I see the main figure in the Gospels as human imagination. This is the power that makes forgiving others and reaching our goals possible. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. John 1:3. Imagination is the only real thing in the world. Everything else is just a version or distortion of it. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Isaiah 53:3. Imagination is the gateway to reality. Blake said, "Man is either the ark of God or a phantom of the earth and water. By default, humans are tied to their senses. But imagination is the eternal and divine part of humanity." Blake called it the eternal body of man, saying it is God himself, Jesus, in whom we all have our being. Blake's view of imagination is the clearest and truest I know. Through imagination, we can become anything we wish to be. With it, we can overcome the conflicts and struggles of the world. When we realize that imagination is the divine power within us, the Christ in us, we see that true life comes only through living imaginatively. I aim to make this audiobook as clear and straightforward as possible to encourage you to use your imagination. I want you to open your immortal eyes inwards into the worlds of thought, where every desire of your heart is already waiting to be realized, like grain ready for harvest. I am come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly. John 10:10. The abundant life Christ promised is available to us now, but we cannot truly experience it until we understand that Christ is our imagination. As Paul wrote, the mystery hid from the ages, Christ in you, the hope of glory. Colossians 1:26. This mystery is imagination, the truth I continually strive to understand more deeply and share with others. Imagination is our Redeemer, the Lord from heaven, born through man but not created by man. Every person is like Mary, called to give birth to Christ within. The story of Christ's immaculate conception and birth may seem irrational to those who read it as history, biography, or cosmology. Modern interpretations that label it as the unconscious or subconscious mind do not clarify the mystery. The true meaning is that Christ's birth and growth within us represent a shift from believing in a God of tradition to experiencing a God of personal reality. If the birth of Christ within us seems slow, it is because we resist letting go of the comforting but false security of tradition. When we realize imagination as the foundation of true religion, the rigid, literal understanding of Scripture will dissolve. Like Moses striking the rock, this revelation will release life-giving meaning that quenches humanity's spiritual thirst. Those who embrace this truth and live by it will transform the understanding of psychological truths into the wine of forgiveness, pouring it like the Good Samaritan on the wounds of the world. The Son of God is not found in history or external forms. He exists as the imagination within each person, becoming real when His presence is awakened in us. Oh, would thy heart but be a manger for His birth. God would once more become a child on earth. Humanity is the garden where the only begotten Son of God sleeps. We awaken Him by raising our imagination to heavenly heights and seeing ourselves and others in divine terms. To live imaginatively is to go beyond our current understanding, always striving for a better vision of life. When we awaken to the life of imagination, we face the test of sonship. We must ask, Father, reveal thy Son in me, and know, as Paul wrote, it pleased God to reveal His Son in me. Galatians 1:16. The ultimate test of sonship is the ability to forgive sin. To forgive is to see someone no longer as they are, but as they aspire to be. Sin is simply falling short of one's ideal or missing the mark in life. Forgiveness, then, is identifying a person with their higher self, or their goal. This is the greatest work of imagination, because it challenges us to take on the nature of opposites. Let the weak man say, I am strong. Joel 3:10. Logically, this seems impossible, but awakened imagination makes it possible. Imagination allows us to embody the qualities we lack and transform our lives by living from this new state of being. This view of Christ Jesus as human imagination raises important questions. Is imagination powerful enough not only to let me believe I am strong, but also to bring that belief into reality? If I imagine myself in a different place or situation, can imagination alone make that vision real? What if I lack the resources for the journey, or my current circumstances seem to block my goal? Could imagination overcome those obstacles and manifest my desires? Does imagination surpass reason? By reason, I mean conclusions drawn from what our senses observe. Does imagination acknowledge the external world of facts? In practical, everyday life, can imagination guide our actions completely? If I can maintain the feeling of my wish fulfilled, will that assumption become reality? And if it does, will my actions during that process seem logical in hindsight? Is imagination capable not only of creating the feeling of having achieved my goal, but also of bringing that goal into physical existence? After imagining myself as the person I want to be, do I need to rely on reasonable actions to bring it to pass? From experience, I am convinced that even if an assumption starts as false, persistence in that assumption will make it true. Consistent imagination is sufficient to achieve anything, and no amount of logical planning or action can replace the power of sustained imagination. The teachings of the Gospels seem to emphasize faith, and faith can be understood as belief in one's imagination. The promise, believe that ye receive and ye shall receive. Mark 11:24 aligns with imagine that you are and you shall be. Did Moses not endure as seeing him who is invisible? Hebrews 11:27 by using the power of his imagination. Was it not his imagination that gave him the strength to persevere? Truth depends on the strength of imagination, not on external facts. Facts are the results of how imagination is used, whether wisely or unwisely. A person becomes what they imagine. Our history is shaped by our own imagination. Imagination is the way, the truth, and the life revealed. Truth cannot be grasped by the logical mind. Where the natural mind sees only a bud, imagination sees a fully bloomed rose. Truth transcends facts. As we awaken to the power of imagination, we come to understand that imagining something is the same as creating it. A true judgment does not need to align with external reality. It shapes reality instead. The imaginative person does not deny the existence of the outer, physical world, but he understands that it is shaped by the inner, continuous activity of imagination. He sees the outer world, along with everything that happens in it, as a reflection of what takes place in the inner world of imagination. To him, everything in life is a result of mental activity, even if the rational mind is unaware of it. However, he knows that everyone must become conscious of this inner activity and recognize the connection between the world of imagination, which causes, and the physical world, which is its effect. It is an incredible discovery to realize that you can imagine yourself into the state of your fulfilled desire and break free from the limitations created by ignorance. The true essence of man is a magnificent imagination. This is the self that must awaken. As it is written, "Awake thou that sleepest, and arise from the dead, and Christ shall give thee light." Ephesians 5:14. When a person discovers that their imagination is Christ, they can perform what appear to be miraculous acts in this world. However, until they recognize Christ as their imagination, they will live in a state of separation, believing everything they see is purely objective and disconnected from themselves, not understanding that everything they encounter is a reflection of their inner self. They resist the idea that they have chosen the circumstances of their life. They struggle with the truth that their life conditions are tied to their own mental activity. Man must come to the unshakable belief that reality is found within, not outside. While others may appear to have their own lives and individuality, their true reality is rooted in your consciousness, just as your reality is rooted in God. Everything begins and ends within you. Chapter 2. Sealed Instructions. The first power we encounter within the soul is imagination. As Dr. Franz Hartmann observed, I first became aware of imagination's immense power, its nature, and its ability to transform through my friend Abdullah's teachings. From there, I began to understand that Jesus symbolizes the awakening of imagination in man. The proof of his presence in us is our ability to forgive sin, which means the ability to identify ourselves or others with our goals in life. Without this identification, true forgiveness is impossible, for only the Son of God can forgive sin. Therefore, when a person is able to hold firmly to their aim, even when reason and the senses argue otherwise, it is evidence of Christ's birth within them. To simply accept appearances and bow to facts is to reveal that Christ is not yet awakened in you. At first, this teaching challenged and even disturbed me. I was a deeply committed Christian and believed that faith was inherited by birth rather than adopted as a conscious way of life. But as time passed, through visions, mystical insights, and practical experiences, these ideas settled into my understanding. They led me to a deeper awareness. Though the process was not easy, it is unsettling to see cherished beliefs, long assumed as truths, begin to crumble. Do you see these great buildings? Not one stone will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. Mark 13:2. The stones of literal understanding cannot remain when one begins to drink from the waters of inner meaning. What was built through external religion must be refined in the fires of mental and spiritual awakening. And what better way is there to grasp the essence of Christ Jesus than to see him as human imagination? Every time we use our imagination with love and compassion for another, we are mediating God to man. In doing so, we are feeding and clothing Christ Jesus. On the other hand, when we imagine harm or ill will, we are crucifying him. Each thought or act of imagination is like a cup of cold water to quench Christ's thirst, or a sponge of vinegar pressed to his lips. The prophet Zechariah said, "Let none of you imagine evil in your hearts against your neighbor." When we follow this advice, we awaken from the sleep of Adam into the full realization of the Son of God within us. Imagination is in the world. It creates the world, yet the world often does not recognize it. I have often wondered, if my imagination is Christ Jesus and all things are possible to him, does this mean all things are possible to me? Through experience, I now understand that when I align myself with my goal, Christ awakens in me. His power is limitless and sufficient for all things. I lay down my life that I might take it again. No man takes it from me, but I lay it down of myself. John 10:18. It is deeply comforting to know that everything I experience comes from my own beliefs and imagination. I am at the center of my circumstances, and as I change inwardly, my outer world must also change. The world presents different appearances based on our state of consciousness. What we see while we are identified with a particular state cannot be perceived when we are no longer fused with it. A state refers to everything that a person believes and accepts as true. For any idea to manifest, the mind must accept it. It is the acceptance and the state with which we align ourselves that determines how things appear. The fusion of imagination and states shapes the world as we perceive it. The world reflects the states that our imagination is fused with. The state from which we think influences the world we live in. The rich, the poor, the virtuous, and the thief are defined by the states through which they perceive the world. It is the differences between these states that create different worlds for each person. Although the world remains the same, each individual experiences it differently. It's not the actions of the good person that should be emulated, but their point of view. Outer changes are futile unless the inner state is transformed. Success is not about copying the behavior of successful people, but about cultivating the right inner actions and internal dialogue. When we detach ourselves from a state, we free ourselves from the circumstances and conditions that came with it. In 1933, in New York City, I turned to Abdullah with a dilemma. He simply asked, "What do you want?" I expressed my desire to spend the winter in Barbados, but I had no money to make it happen. "If you imagine yourself in Barbados," he said, "and see the world from that state of consciousness, instead of just thinking about Barbados, you will find a way to be there. Do not focus on the how. The state of consciousness you occupy, being already in Barbados, will create the means to manifest it." We live by committing ourselves to invisible states, fusing our imagination with things beyond us. In this fusion, we experience the results of our inner state. No one can lose what they have, except by detaching from the state where their experiences have their natural existence. You must imagine yourself in the state of your fulfilled desire, Abdullah advised, and fall asleep while viewing the world from Barbados. The world we describe from observation is always relative to ourselves. Our imagination connects us to the desired state, but we must use imagination skillfully, not just as an observer thinking about the end, but as a participant thinking from the end. We must fully immerse ourselves in the feeling of already being there in imagination. If we do this, our inner experience will manifest in the outer world. This is not mere fancy, Abdullah said, but a truth you can prove by experience. His lesson was about entering the state of the wish fulfilled. Thinking from the end. Any state exists as a mere possibility while we think of it, but it becomes overpoweringly real when we think from it. Thinking from the end is the way of Christ. So I began right then and there, directing my thoughts beyond the limits of my current state and focusing on the feeling of already being in Barbados, viewing the world from that perspective. Abdullah stressed the importance of the state from which we view the world, especially as we fall asleep. All prophets say that the voice of God is most clearly heard in dreams. As Job 33:15-16 says, "In a dream, in a vision of the night, when deep sleep falls upon men, when slumbering upon the bed, then he opens the ears of men and seals their instruction." That night, and for several nights afterward, I fell asleep in the assumption that I was already in my father's house in Barbados. Within a month, I received a letter from my brother, expressing his desire to have the family together for Christmas, and asking me to use the enclosed steamship ticket to come to Barbados. I sailed just 2 days after receiving the letter and spent a wonderful winter in Barbados. This experience has deeply convinced me that man can become anything he desires if he makes the conception habitual and consistently thinks from the end. It also showed me that I can no longer blame external circumstances. The good and bad of my life depend entirely on my inner state. The way the world presents itself to me is determined by the state from which I view it. Man is free in his choices, acting based on the conceptions he consciously or unconsciously adopts. All states of consciousness are available for us to choose and embody, but no amount of rationalizing will bring about the desired state unless we actively choose it. The imaginative image is the key. It is the ultimate purpose of imagination to cultivate in us the spirit of Jesus, which is the continual forgiveness of sin, constantly identifying ourselves with our highest aim. Only by identifying ourselves with our goal can we forgive ourselves for not yet having reached it. All other efforts are in vain. On this path, wherever we direct our imagination, we will also gravitate physically to that place or state. As Jesus said, "In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there ye may be also." John 14:2. By imagining myself sleeping in my Father's house as if I were physically there, I fused my imagination with that state and was compelled to experience it in the physical realm. The vividness of this state was so intense that, had anyone sensitive entered the room where I was sleeping in imagination, they would have seen me there. A person is where their imagination is. They must be where their imagination is, because imagination is an extension of the self. From experience, I know that I have been seen by others to whom I wanted to be visible, even when physically I was far away. Through the intensity of my imagination and feeling, I imagined myself in Barbados rather than simply thinking about it. This mental act spanned the Atlantic Ocean, influencing my brother to desire my presence for the family reunion at Christmas. Thinking from the end, the feeling of my wish already fulfilled, was the source of all subsequent events, such as my brother's impulse to send me the steamship ticket. It was the cause of both the outer events and their results. W.B. Yeats, in Ideas of Good and Evil, page 35, discusses experiences similar to mine, writing, "If all who have described events like this have not dreamed, we should rewrite our histories. For all men, certainly all imaginative men, must be forever casting forth enchantments, glamour, illusions. And all men, especially tranquil men who have no powerful egotistic life, must be continually passing under their power. Determined imagination, thinking from the end, is the beginning of all miracles." I would like to give you an immense belief in miracles, but a miracle is merely the name given by those who are unaware of the power and function of imagination to the works of imagination. Imagining oneself into the feeling of the wish fulfilled is the means by which a new state is entered. This is what imbues that state with the quality of isness. As Hermes tells us, that which is manifested. That which has been or shall be is unmanifested, but not dead. For so, the eternal activity of God animates all things. For the one who would wisely and consciously create circumstances, the future must become the present within the imagination. We must translate vision into being, shifting from thinking of to thinking from. Imagination must center itself in a state and view the world from that state. Thinking from the end is an intense perception of the world of fulfilled desire. Thinking from the state desired is creative living. Ignorance of this ability to think from the end is bondage. It is the root of all bondage that binds man. To passively surrender to the evidence of the senses underestimates the capacities of the inner self. Once man accepts thinking from the end as a creative principle with which he can cooperate, he is redeemed from the absurdity of attempting to achieve his objective by merely thinking of it. Construct all ends according to the pattern of fulfilled desire. Life, at its core, is simply the appeasement of hunger, and the infinite states of consciousness from which a man can view the world are purely means to satisfy that hunger. The principle behind each state is a form of hunger, driving the passion for self-gratification to ever higher levels of experience. Desire is the mainspring of the mental machinery. It is a blessed thing. A natural craving, it has a state of consciousness as its right and natural satisfaction. But one thing I do, forgetting the things which are behind and stretching forward to the things which are before, I press on toward the goal. Philippians 3:13. To have an aim in life is essential. Without an aim, we drift. What wantest thou of me? Is the implied question most often asked by the central figure of the Gospels. When defining your aim, you must want it. As the hart panteth after the water brooks, so panteth my soul after thee, O God. Psalms 42:1. It is the lack of this passionate direction in life that causes man to fail in accomplishment. The key is bridging the gap between desire, thinking of, and satisfaction. Thinking from. We must move mentally from thinking of the end to thinking from the end. Reason could never do this, as it is restricted to the evidence of the senses. But imagination, being unrestricted, can. Desire exists to be gratified through the activity of imagination. Through imagination, man escapes the limitations of the senses and the bondage of reason. There is no stopping the man who can think from the end. Nothing can hinder him. He creates the means and grows beyond limitations into ever greater mansions of the Lord. It does not matter what he has been or what he is. All that matters is, what does he want? He knows that the world is a manifestation of the mental activity within himself. Therefore, he strives to determine and control the ends from which he thinks. In his imagination, he dwells in the end, confident that he will dwell there in the flesh as well. He places his whole trust in the feeling of the wish fulfilled and lives by committing himself to that state. The art of fortune lies in tempting him to do so. Like the man at the pool of Bethesda, he is ready for the moving of the waters of imagination, knowing that every desire is ripe grain to him who knows how to think from the end. He remains indifferent to mere reasonable probability, confident that through continuous imagination, his assumptions will solidify into fact. But the challenge is how to persuade people everywhere that thinking from the end is the only living way. How to foster it in every activity of man and reveal it as the fullness of life, not as the compensation of the disappointed. That is the problem. Life is controllable. You can experience what you desire once you realize that you are his son, and that you are what you are by virtue of the state of consciousness from which you think and view the world. Son, thou art ever with me, and all that I have is thine. Luke 15:31. Chapter 3. Highways of the Inner World. Duality is an inherent condition of life. Everything that exists is double, and man is a dual creature with contrary principles embedded in his nature. These opposing forces war within him, presenting attitudes to life that are often at odds. This eternal conflict is the ongoing battle, the war in heaven, where the younger inner man of imagination seeks to assert his supremacy over the older outer man of sense. The Bible speaks of this duality in terms of the natural and spiritual outlooks on life. The natural man struggles to grasp the things of the spirit, for they are spiritually discerned and often seem foolish to him. But it is through the inner, imaginative life that man begins to awaken, recognizing that there are two centers of thought within him, one that is worldly and one that is divine. The inner world of thought and feeling which the inner body is attuned to is just as real as the outer physical world. However, the inner world expresses a more fundamental part of reality. This inner body, although unseen, must be consciously exercised and directed for its potential to be realized. It is through the movement of the inner body that all events are brought into being. The outer world is subject to the movement of the inner world, aligning with the actions and desires projected from the inner realm. When the actions of the inner body match the actions that the outer must take to fulfill desire, that desire becomes a reality. To manifest this, one must construct a mental drama that implies the desired result. Engage the imagination fully, and as the body rests, enter into the scene mentally. The movement of the imagination is the key to unlocking the fulfillment of desires in the outer world. By mentally rehearsing the desired outcome, especially just before sleep, the imagination takes hold and molds reality. The outer world will follow the lead of the inner world, transforming the imagined into tangible experiences. The power lies in consciously aligning thought and feeling, shaping the inner drama as though it were already true. At first, your thoughts may seem like chaotic, unfocused ramblings, like sheep without a shepherd. But do not lose heart. If your attention drifts repeatedly, simply bring it back, again and again, to the course you've set. Keep redirecting your focus, no matter how often it strays, until, through persistence, your thoughts follow the path you've determined. The inner journey must always have direction, purpose, and intent. When you begin the journey within, it is not just a mental exercise. It is a commitment to reach for the goal you have already seen and accepted as true. As Professor John Livingston Lowes explained in The Road to Xanadu, fancy and imagination are not separate forces, but rather two intensities of the same power. The difference between them lies in the degree of intensity with which they operate. At lower levels, this power gathers and associates images, but at its highest intensity, it merges those images into a unified whole, creating a profound fusion of thoughts and desires. This principle was demonstrated by a blind girl living in San Francisco who faced a transportation dilemma. A bus rerouting made her daily commute incredibly long, and she realized that the solution might lie in having a car. Although she couldn't drive, she believed she could still be driven. Rather than focusing on the lack of a car, she imagined herself already in one. She sat in her living room and mentally placed herself in the car. She could feel the rhythm of the motor, smell the gasoline, and feel the car's movement. She visualized the driver, a man, thanking her as she left the car and hearing the door close. In her imagination, she was experiencing the entire journey, not just thinking about it. She fully immersed herself in the feeling of being driven, embodying the experience in her mind, the emotional continuity of her desire. Her unwavering belief in the outcome propelled her imagination to its fullest capacity. This mental exercise was not mere fantasy. It was an intentional, directed process that raised her inner energy to its highest potential. The emotions of expectancy and fulfillment were so powerfully fused that they moved from her mind into action. The desire, felt and imagined with intense emotion, then began to manifest in the physical world. The power of the inner self is magnified when emotions align with the mental imagery. For true progress, the emotions must fuel the inner movement. And the best way to do this is by focusing on actions that bring joy, fulfillment, and a sense of personal achievement. We must genuinely find pleasure in the actions we take, whether in the realm of imagination or physical reality. The blind girl's success illustrates this principle perfectly. Over 2 days, she vividly imagined her car ride, giving it all the joy and sensory experience of reality. She didn't just think about the ride. She felt the car, heard the engine, smelled the gasoline, and even interacted with the driver. Her inner world became so rich that it couldn't help but manifest in the physical world. The story of her problem reached the right people. One man shared her plight with a friend who then volunteered to drive her to and from work. This entire sequence of events illustrates that the inner world has a direct and powerful influence on the outer world. The blind girl's internal ride, her imagination, was not a mere daydream, but a deliberate, vivid, and emotionally charged experience. As she focused on her wish fulfilled, that imagined scenario became real. The people involved were unconsciously responding to her internal state, fulfilling her desires without realizing they were playing a part in her creative process. For her, the action of being driven to work was not a surprise. It was a natural outcome of the inner work she had done. The physical manifestation, being driven to work in under 15 minutes, was merely the outer expression of the inner movement she had made. Her triumph came from her clear vision, her unwavering focus on the imagined outcome, and the emotional energy she poured into it. This process reveals the law of creation. To bring any desire into physical reality, it must first be imagined in vivid detail as if it is already real. The actions in the outer world are reflections of the inner action. The world responds to the movement within, and when the inner self moves with conviction, the outer world has no choice but to follow suit. Her example teaches us that it is not just about thinking or desiring. It is about feeling and acting, as though our desires are already fulfilled. When we align our imagination, emotions, and actions in this way, we can shape the world around us. The journey of manifestation begins within and travels outward, from the inner world of thought and feeling to the external world of physical experience. The movement is always from the inside out. To become a self-determined being, the key lies in mentally constructing a drama that embodies the fulfillment of your desires. Visualize a scene where your objective is already realized. Then close your eyes and dive deeply into that mental creation. By centering your imagination in the action and feeling of your wish fulfilled, you are actively participating in the experience, not merely observing it. This inner action is where transformation begins. The mind is a powerful creator, and when you give it the task of imagining yourself already in possession of your desires, you are aligning your inner world with your goals. This act of imagination is not a passive thought process, but a dynamic, active engagement. Through such mental exercises, you begin to experience a movement within yourself that will shape your external reality. Your thoughts are no longer fleeting. They become the seeds of action, generating movement in the inner world that will ultimately manifest in the outer world. By engaging in this practice, you learn to become the architect of your own life, shaping it with intention. The more vividly and consciously you practice this process, the more natural it becomes. Your desires begin to feel less like distant hopes and more like inevitable outcomes that are already set in motion. The power of the inner self is limitless. When you focus on the action and feeling of fulfillment, you unlock your potential. Your imagination, fueled by intense emotion and clear direction, becomes the vehicle through which you create your reality. You are no longer bound by external circumstances. You have taken control, not through force or effort, but through the subtle yet powerful art of imagination. As Joshua 1:3 reminds us, "Wherever the sole of your foot shall tread, the same give I unto you." When your inner journey aligns with your external actions, the world responds. And Zephaniah 3:17 reassures us, "The Lord thy God in the midst of thee is mighty," reminding us that we are not alone in this creative process. The power is within you, and it is through conscious, directed inner action that you can create the life you desire. Chapter 4. The Pruning Shears of Revision. The path to personal transformation begins with revising your inner experiences, especially your thoughts and attitudes. The concept of revision is the first step in correction or cure, and it all starts within yourself. By revising how you perceive and respond to the events of your day, you alter the course of your reality. The ability to revise allows you to rewrite your past and reshape your inner world according to your ideals. As Emerson wisely stated, "What we are, that only can we see." This highlights the importance of changing our internal perspective in order to transform how we experience life. The practice of revisiting your day and mentally rewriting it to align with your desires or ideals is a powerful tool for self-transformation. If something did not go as you hoped, change it in your mind. Mentally rewrite a disappointing letter. Revise an encounter that did not go well, and keep repeating this new version until it feels real to you. This process of revision is not just about altering memories, but about shifting your perception to a higher state of being. The ultimate goal of revision is to embody the spirit of Jesus, a spirit of continuous forgiveness and understanding. True forgiveness is a creative act of the imagination. It is not merely letting go of past hurts, but actively re-envisioning the past in a way that reflects your ideal, a version of events where peace and understanding replace conflict and resentment. Through this imaginative exercise, you cultivate a deeper sense of forgiveness, which in turn lifts you to higher levels of being. Each time you forgive, you experience a rebirth, a daily Easter, an opportunity to rise again, transformed by the power of imagination. Just as Jesus' forgiveness was a continuous act, so too can our acts of forgiveness elevate us daily. Every act of genuine forgiveness, every time you revise your experiences in imagination, is a step toward becoming a new version of yourself. This process of daily revision, when done with sincerity and purpose, leads to a life that is ever evolving, ever expanding. It is through forgiveness, through imaginative revision, that we free ourselves from the constraints of the past and step into a new reality, one where we continually rise and transform. Just as Jesus' resurrection symbolizes the eternal potential for change and growth. Freedom and forgiveness are deeply intertwined, forming the foundation of personal liberation. To withhold forgiveness is to remain in conflict with oneself, shackled by the very thoughts and emotions that keep us bound. The key to freedom is in our ability to forgive, for it is through forgiveness that we release ourselves from the past and the limitations we place on ourselves. As the scripture says, "Forgive, and you shall be forgiven." Luke 6:37. This is not merely a command to forgive from a sense of obligation, but an invitation to do so with a genuine desire. To forgive others is not simply an act of service or duty. It is an act of inner liberation, a conscious choice to release the hold that past grievances have on our lives. Forgiveness is deeply connected to the joy of revision. When you revise your experiences, you are actively choosing to see them differently. And in doing so, you are engaging in an act of forgiveness. This is not a reluctant task, but a joyful one. It is in the act of revision that you transform your internal world, moving from resentment and anger to peace and harmony. You must delight in this process because it is not just about changing how you see others, but also about changing how you see yourself. To forgive effectively, you must desire to see others through the lens of their highest potential, their ideal self. Thy ways are ways of pleasantness, and all thy paths are peace. Proverbs 3:17. When you engage in revision with this joyful intention, you are creating peace, not only for others, but for yourself. Duty alone will not carry you forward. It is the genuine joy and inner commitment to seeing things differently that brings true transformation. Each time you revise an experience, no matter how small, you are making a victory over your own limitations. A man's foes are those of his own household. Matthew 10:36, and this household is his state of mind. By revising your day, you change your state of mind, and in doing so, change your future. The power of revision lies in its ability to free you from the mental patterns that once held you back. The story of the prodigal son is a testament to the power of a change of heart. His transformation was not the result of external circumstances, but of an internal shift, a radical change of perception. When you engage in revision, you too can experience this transformation, no matter how improbable it may seem. The battle for freedom, for inner peace, is fought in the imagination. The man who does not revise his thoughts and perceptions remains trapped in the limitations of his past. All things whatsoever ye would, that men should do to you, even so do ye to them. Matthew 7:12. This is the law of the universe. What you desire for yourself, you must first give to others. When you revise with the intention of bringing peace and freedom to yourself and to others, you are fulfilling this law, and in doing so, you are releasing yourself from the confines of a past that no longer serves you. The artist's story beautifully illustrates how the process of revision and imagination can lead to freedom from physical pain and emotional distress. Her experience highlights the power of consciously revisiting and revising events, both internal and external, to align them with a more harmonious and desired outcome. After the injury to her foot, instead of focusing on the pain or becoming anxious about the physical condition, she turned inward, reviewing the day through her imagination. This practice allowed her to release herself from the negative emotions tied to the incident. Rather than dwelling on the misfortune of the chair striking her foot, she consciously reframed the situation, acknowledging the janitor's possible frustration and his unintended contribution to the event. This act of understanding and forgiveness enabled her to shift her perception. As she proceeded with her imagination work, she encountered the issue with the man who had been avoiding her for the past year. She could have easily allowed this unresolved conflict to affect her, but instead, she used her imagination to revise the interaction. She mentally re-envisioned the moment as a pleasant exchange, changing the dynamic from cold indifference to a warm, friendly connection. This act of revision brought her peace, turning what was once an uncomfortable situation into something more positive. The artist's ability to forgive, both herself and others, was key to her healing. By revising the events of her day, she rewrote her experiences and freed herself from the hold of past grievances. This process also allowed her to shift her focus from her foot's physical condition to a joyful experience at the concert, thus choosing a more fulfilling, positive reality for herself. This story reinforces the notion that our inner world, governed by our thoughts, imagination, and perception, has the power to shape and transform our outer world. By revisiting our past experiences with the intention to forgive and revise, we free ourselves from the limitations of our senses and allow space for new, positive outcomes. In essence, the true power lies within us to rewrite our stories, and through this practice, we can experience profound healing and freedom. The artist's experience beautifully illustrates how revision, forgiveness, and inner work can manifest profound healing and transformation. Her process of revising her experiences, mentally rewiring events to align with her ideal, highlights the power of imagination to rewrite reality. The moment she revisited the day, seeing herself healed, the physical symptoms of her injury vanished. This demonstrates that what we experience in the physical world is often a reflection of our inner world, and by revising our perceptions and experiences through the art of imagination, we can change our external circumstances. Blake's words about forgetting and forgiving in heaven, especially for the female, resonate deeply in this context. The artist was able to forgive not just others but herself, releasing the tension and stress surrounding her injury and the unresolved emotional residue from her day. This forgiveness is not a passive action, but an active one of transformation, where she rewrote her story with love and understanding, turning potential pain into a lesson in healing. By practicing the art of revision, we reclaim our power to shape our reality. The artist's story shows us that when we let go of the false stories we tell ourselves, those rooted in past hurts, mistakes, or misunderstandings, and instead choose to revise them with love and an idealized vision of what we want, we open the door to a life of freedom and peace. The act of revising is not about denying the reality of our experiences, but about choosing a higher, more empowering way of interpreting and reacting to them. This aligns with the principle that the outer world is only a reflection of our inner movements. When we adjust our thoughts and feelings, we create corresponding changes in the world around us. The key is to practice revision regularly, and to do so with genuine desire, because our effectiveness grows with practice. And through it, we can shape a life that aligns with our highest ideals. Living imaginatively, revising the day, and applying the truth to our lives leads us to a higher state of being. As we internalize these practices, we come closer to understanding and embodying the idea that Christ in you, the hope of glory. Through revision, we align ourselves with our true nature, allowing love, forgiveness, and transformation to guide us toward the creation of our own paradise, here and now. The choice is always ours, to resist or to revise. The power lies in our hands to reshape our lives and to make beauty, peace, and healing our reality. Chapter 5. The Coin of Heaven. William Blake's profound question about the power of persuasion and its connection to creation speaks directly to the power of imagination and belief. When we firmly persuade ourselves that something is true, we align our inner world with that belief, activating the forces within us to bring it into reality. Blake suggests that poets, those who live through imagination, understand this power deeply. In times of imagination, such persuasion can indeed move mountains. We're mindful of the extraordinary feats achieved by those who live and act with unshakable belief. However, many people are not fully persuaded of their potential or the world they can create, and thus they remain in the realm of limitation. This idea aligns with the wisdom of the Apostle Paul in Romans. Let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. The firm persuasion of a belief, when nurtured within, becomes the foundation for its manifestation. To be fully persuaded is not just a passive belief, but an active, intense attention to the desire you want to see realized. Your inner speech is a powerful creative tool. It is the constant conversation you hold with yourself, whether audible or inaudible, which shapes the world you perceive and experience. These inner dialogues are the foundation of the world you live in, and by consciously shifting them to match your desired outcomes, you align your inner reality with the outer one. Every thought, every word, every inner conversation is a seed planted in the fertile ground of your consciousness, and these seeds grow into your experiences. Just as the rider controls the horse and the captain directs the ship with small reins, your inner speech, though seemingly small and subtle, holds the power to direct the course of your life. The little fire kindled by your words can set in motion great changes in the direction of your life. If your inner speech is filled with words of doubt, fear, and limitation, it will manifest in your life as external circumstances that reflect those beliefs. But if your speech is aligned with your desires, dreams, and a deep belief in your power to create, then the world around you will reflect those inner truths. Daniel's vision of the God in heaven, who reveals secrets and makes known the future, is a powerful reminder that our inner world, our thoughts, and our speech are our direct connection to the divine, the creative force within us. The power to shape our destiny lies in the thoughts and words we consistently nurture within ourselves. To shift your life, begin with your inner speech. Observe the words and mental conversations you are having and ask yourself, are they aligned with your desires? Are they speaking the language of fulfillment, peace, and joy? By consciously redirecting your inner speech to match your ideal state, you begin the process of transforming your world. Inner talking indeed reflects the state we are fused with, and the state of our mind shapes the experiences we encounter. When we consciously shift the state of mind we are operating from, we inevitably transform the conversation we are having within ourselves. And that conversation then becomes the very blueprint for our future actions and experiences. As Ephesians 4:22-24 advises, we must put off the former conversation, the old negative patterns, and instead put on the new man, which is created in righteousness and aligned with our highest ideals. Just as our bodies need nourishment from a variety of foods, our minds require a change in the mental food we consume. If we continually nourish ourselves with negative, defeatist thoughts, we are perpetuating that state in our lives. But if we shift to positive, constructive, and affirming inner speech, we begin sowing the seeds for a different reality. By consciously initiating positive inner speech based on the fulfillment of our desires, we begin to shape our future. Repeating a sentence such as, I am successful and confident in my career, or I am a loving and supportive partner, is more than just wishful thinking. It is aligning our inner dialogue with the version of ourselves that has already achieved those goals. This process of cultivating the speech of our ideal self draws us closer to it, and over time, we naturally attract circumstances, people, and opportunities that align with that inner state. John 1:1 reminds us that in the beginning was the Word, reinforcing the idea that words, whether spoken or thought, are the foundations upon which our reality is built. Our words are seeds that, when sown in fertile soil, grow into the experiences and conditions of our lives. Just as the seeds of the sesamum plant produce sesamum, and the seeds of the corn produce corn, our thoughts and inner speech produce outcomes in kind. The insight shared by D.H. Lawrence that the loveless never find love, only the loving find love, highlights the essential truth that what we attract into our lives is a reflection of our internal state. If we seek love from a place of scarcity or need, we will only amplify that lack. But when we embody love within ourselves, when we are the loving, we naturally draw love towards us without needing to chase after it. To truly embody your ideal state, ask yourself if your inner speech aligns with the version of yourself that has already achieved your goal. If it doesn't, consciously change it. Speak as though you have already realized your desire and let that speech shape your actions. Through this constant alignment of inner speech and actions with your ideal self, you bring forth the new man, the version of you who already exists in the realm of possibility and begins to emerge in your external reality. The power of inner talking lies in its ability to cultivate the environment of your mind. When you nurture the speech of your ideal, that speech naturally transitions into your outer world, illuminating your path and shaping your destiny. Just as the right inner speech matures in the dark, so does the fulfillment of our desires. Quietly, subtly but inevitably, as we align our inner conversation with our highest vision. The power of mind and speech, as highlighted in the Hermetica and other spiritual teachings, reveals a profound truth. Our inner speech, closely tied to our imagination, is the creator of the reality we experience. Walter Scott's translation of the Hermetica conveys that the gifts of mind and speech are not just tools but keys to immortality, guiding us toward a higher divine state. These gifts, when used with wisdom, align us with the forces of creation, transcending the limitations of the physical body. Your inner speech, the constant dialogue within your mind, is the very sound that shapes your world. Each thought, each word you speak to yourself, is a thread woven into the tapestry of your life. Your inner conversations, whether conscious or subconscious, reveal your deepest beliefs and desires, and they draw corresponding events into your experience. To change the outer world, you must first change the inner conversation. As Hermes so succinctly put it, life is the union of word and mind. When you align your inner speech with the fulfillment of your desires, you create a direct pathway from your inner world to the external world. This is not mere wishful thinking. It is a practice of deliberate imagination and conscious affirmation. Through persistent assumption of the wish fulfilled, you are training your mind to act as though your desires are already realized. The more you repeat this inner conversation, the more natural it becomes. Imagination fuses with reality. The still small voice, mentioned in many spiritual traditions, is the quiet inner voice that speaks in harmony with the truth of your fulfilled desires. It is the whisper of divine guidance, the voice of creation itself, and it speaks the reality of your desires before they are manifest in the physical world. By consciously aligning your inner speech with this voice, you shape the world around you. To truly create your desired life, you must listen attentively to your inner speech. Become aware of what you are saying to yourself. What thoughts and feelings are you consenting to? They are not mere reflections of the world around you. They are the very foundation of the world you are creating. To resolve any situation, you need to master the art of using your imagination and inner speech, constantly affirming that your desires are already fulfilled. This process transforms not only your circumstances, but your very sense of self. By calling things that are not seen as though they were, as Romans 4:17 teaches, you act in faith, imagining the unseen as a present reality. The act of imagination, combined with the conscious use of inner speech, is the key to manifesting your desires. Every situation can be resolved by this practice, as it aligns your inner world with the external one, bringing your dreams into tangible form. Right inner speech is the foundation of transformation and freedom. It is the highest art, the key to breaking free from the limitations imposed by ignorance and misdirection. Without mastering this art, life becomes a battlefield, a place of struggle and toil where fulfillment seems distant and scarce. Yet, through deliberate and purposeful inner talking, life can become a marvel, a continuous unfolding of wonder and creation. Speech is an image of mind, and mind is an image of God, declares the Hermetica. This connection reveals the sacred power of inner speech. To speak rightly within is to align oneself with divine creativity, shaping life in harmony with one's highest ideals. The story of April 12th, 1953, when your wife was awakened by the voice of authority, underscores a profound truth. Life must not be spent thoughtlessly, but invested with intention. To spend is to waste, to scatter energy without purpose or return. To invest is to sow with expectation, to channel energy into creating what we desire. At every moment, we face an infinite choice between what we are and what we want to be. What we want to be already exists, waiting for realization. To bring it forth, we must match our inner speech, our thoughts and feelings, with the state of the fulfilled desire. This alignment is the transformative power of the moment. Thought is the currency of heaven, and money is its earthly symbol. Each moment is a coin that can be spent wastefully or invested wisely. Negative inner talking, fear, doubt, resentment, squanders this currency, perpetuating limitations and suffering. Conversely, assuming the feeling of the wish fulfilled is a wise investment, yielding returns in the form of realized desires and a life of harmony. Matthew 18:19 reminds us of the power of agreement. If two of you shall agree on earth as touching anything that they shall ask, it shall be done for them. This agreement can be within ourselves, between our inner speech and our desire, or with others who share our vision. It is this unity that compels the creative force within to bring forth our desires. Isaiah 55:11 assures us, "My word shall not return unto me void, but it shall accomplish that which I please." The circumstances of life are the visible manifestations of inner speech, the Word made flesh. Hermes explains that the Word is Son, and the mind is Father of the Word, emphasizing the unity of thought and speech in the act of creation. To imitate God, as Ephesians 5:1 suggests, is to align our inner speech with our ideals, shaping an outer world that reflects our highest aspirations. As 2 Samuel 23:2 declares, "The Lord spake by me, and his word was in my tongue." This underscores the divine power entrusted to human imagination and speech. Deuteronomy 30:14-15 present the ultimate truth. "The word is very near to you, in your mouth and in your heart, that you may do it. See, I have set before you this day life and good, death and evil, blessings and cursings. Choose life." To choose life is to choose thoughts and words that bless, that align with good, and that invest in the fulfillment of desires. Man's ignorance of the future stems from ignorance of his inner talking. Inner speech mirrors imagination, and imagination governs reality. When inner speech matches desire, the desired state is objectively realized. This truth is reflected in Blake's warning. Sooner murder an infant in its cradle than nurse unacted desires. Unfulfilled desires become the source of frustration and dis-ease. But fulfillment is always within reach when inner speech aligns with imagination. James 3:6 reminds us of the immense power of the tongue. "It setteth on fire the course of nature." Inner speech is not a passive act. It is the active force shaping reality. When speech and desire are in conflict, speech prevails, for it continuously objectifies itself. Alter your inner speech, and the world you perceive will change. Inner speech is not just a reflection of imagination. It is imagination in action. It is Christ, the creative force within, working through us to manifest our chosen realities. By mastering this art, we transform life from a battlefield into a place of infinite possibility and joy. Choose wisely. Choose life. Chapter 6. It is within. Rivers, mountains, cities, and villages are all human. When you truly enter into their essence, you realize you are walking in heavens and earths, as these realms exist within you. Your imagination holds the heavens, the earth, and all that you perceive. What appears to be external is, in truth, internal, a reflection of your imagination. This world of mortality is but a shadow of that inner reality, as Blake eloquently expressed. To Blake, the inner world was as tangible and real as the outer land of waking life. He viewed his dreams and visions not as illusions, but as the true form's underlying nature. Blake understood that the outer world is built upon the foundation of consciousness, reducing all experiences to the substance of imagination. The kingdom of heaven is not some distant or external place. It exists within you. The real man, the imaginative man, is the source of all that is seen. He has endowed the outer world with its properties, and the enduring solidity of the physical world is proof of the inner world's absolute reality. This imaginative world is the origin of creation. No one can come to you except through the connections you draw, as the Father draws all unto himself. I and my Father are one, and in this unity lies the secret of creation. The world you observe is a reflection of your own mental activity, the visible expression of your thoughts and imagination. When you recognize this truth, that your world is your creation, the first instinct is to reshape it in alignment with your ideals. Yet bringing these ideals into physical reality is not an effortless task. When you turn inward and stop conforming to external influences, a new discipline arises. The discipline of self. The realization of your ideal requires a profound transformation, a reordering of the patterns that constrain imagination. Imagination, though boundless in potential, moves according to established habits. These habits must be broken, for without change, imagination remains captive to the paralysis of custom, and dreams fade into the rigidity of routine. Imagination, the Christ within man, is free from the necessity of perfection. It gives man the freedom to choose, enabling him to decide between good and evil, harmony and chaos. Choose this day whom ye will serve. Imagination provides the power to create, but it is up to the individual to direct this power toward the realization of their highest ideals. It is through conscious choice and discipline that the outer world can reflect the beauty, harmony, and perfection of the inner vision. But once the choice is made and accepted so deeply that it becomes the individual's habitual consciousness, imagination unfolds its limitless power. It shapes the outer, physical world into the image of the habitual inner speech and actions of that individual. To achieve the ideal, man must first change the patterns his imagination habitually follows. Habitual thought is a mirror of character, and the way to transform the external world is by aligning the inner speech and actions with the outward expressions of a fulfilled desire. Our ideals are always waiting for expression, but unless we align our inner speech and actions with the reality of our desired state, they remain dormant, unable to take form. Inner speech and action are the divine channels through which God acts. Without offering these paths, there is no way for the prayer to find its fulfillment. The outer behavior of man is mechanical, driven by the inner self. Old habits of the inner self persist until they are replaced with new intentional ones. The second or inner man has a unique quality. He imparts his own essence to the outer self. Any transformation in the inner self's behavior produces corresponding changes in the outer world. In mysticism, a change of consciousness is described as death. This death is not the annihilation of imagination or the state it was fused with, but rather the dissolution of their union. Fusion implies a close connection, not complete oneness. When this connection dissolves, the conditions it created disappear. As Paul said, I die daily. Blake, speaking to his friend Crabb Robinson, remarked, "There is nothing like death. Death is the best thing that can happen in life. But most people die so late and take such an unmerciful time in dying. God knows, their neighbors never see them rise from the dead." To the external sensory man who is unaware of the inner self, this concept may seem incomprehensible. Yet Blake clarified it with his own life when he wrote, a year before his death. William Blake, one who is very much delighted with being in good company. Born 28th November 1757 in London, and has died several times since. When a man realizes that Christ is his imagination, he understands why Christ must die and rise again to save man. It becomes clear that imagination must detach itself from the current state and fuse with a higher concept of self to transcend limitations and find salvation. A beautiful example of this mystical death and rebirth is reflected in the story of someone who experienced it firsthand. "Last week," wrote the one who rose from the dead, "a friend offered me her mountain home for the Christmas holidays, as she thought she might go east. She said she would confirm this week. We had a pleasant discussion, during which I mentioned your teachings in connection with Dunn's experiment with time, which she had been reading. When her letter arrived Monday, I was overcome with a sudden sense of depression. Despite reading that she had confirmed the offer and informed me about where to get the keys, my mood worsened. Intuitively, I felt there was something more between the lines. I reread the first page, and as I turned to the second, I noticed a postscript on the back of the first sheet. It contained a painfully direct description of a flaw in my character, something I had worked for years to overcome and believed I had succeeded in resolving for the past 2 years. Yet, here it was again, described with precision, as though it had never been conquered. I was stunned and desolated. I thought to myself, what is this letter trying to tell me? In the first place, she invited me to use her house, as I have been seeing myself in some lovely home during the holidays. In the second place, nothing comes to me except I draw it. And thirdly, I have been hearing nothing but good news. So, the obvious conclusion is that something in me corresponds to this letter, and no matter what it looks like, it is good news. I reread the letter, and as I did so, I asked, what is there here for me to see? And then I saw. It started out, after our conversation of last week, I feel I can tell you. And the rest of the page was studded with whirs and waces as currents in a seed cake. A great feeling of elation swept over me. It was all in the past. The thing I had labored so long to correct was done. I suddenly realized that my friend was a witness to my resurrection. I whirled around the studio chanting, "It's all in the past. It is done. Thank you. It is done." I gathered all my gratitude up in a big ball of light and shot it straight to you. And if you saw a flash of lightning Monday evening shortly after 6 your time, that was it. Now, instead of writing a polite letter, because it is the correct thing to do, I can write, giving sincere thanks for her frankness and thanking her for the loan of her house. Thank you so much for your teaching, which has made my beloved imagination truly my Saviour. And now, if any man shall say unto her, Lo, here is Christ, or there, she will believe it not, for she knows that the kingdom of God is within her, and that she herself must assume full responsibility for the incarnation of her ideal, and that nothing but death and resurrection will bring her to it. She has found her Saviour, her beloved imagination forever expanding in the bosom of God. There is only one reality, and that is Christ. Human imagination, the inheritance and final achievement of the whole of humanity, that we, speaking the truth in love, may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ. Ephesians 4:15. Chapter 7. Creation is finished. I am the beginning and the end. There is nothing to come that has not been, and is. Ecclesiastes 3:15 E.R.5. Blake saw all possible human situations as already made states. He saw every aspect, every plot, and drama as already worked out as mere possibilities, as long as we are not in them, but as overpowering realities when we are in them. He described these states as sculptures of losses halls. Distinguish therefore states from individuals in those states. States change, but individual identities never change nor cease. The imagination is not a state, said Blake. It is the human existence itself. Affection or love becomes a state when divided from imagination. Just how important this is to remember is almost impossible to say. But the moment the individual realizes this for the first time is the most momentous in his life. And to be encouraged to feel this is the highest form of encouragement it is possible to give. This truth is common to all men, but the consciousness of it, and much more, the self-consciousness of it, is another matter. The day I realized this great truth, that everything in my world is a manifestation of the mental activity which goes on within me, and that the conditions and circumstances of my life only reflect the state of consciousness with which I am fused, is the most momentous in my life. But the experience that brought me to this certainty is so remote from ordinary existence, I have long hesitated to tell it, for my reason refused to admit the conclusions to which the experience impelled me. Nevertheless, this experience revealed to me that I am supreme within the circle of my own state of consciousness, and that it is the state with which I am identified that determines what I experience. Therefore, it should be shared with all, for to know this is to become free from the world's greatest tyranny, the belief in a second course. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Matthew 5:8. Blessed are they whose imagination has been so purged of the beliefs in second courses, they know that imagination is all, and all is imagination. One day I quietly slipped from my apartment in New York City into some remote yesteryear's countryside. As I entered the dining room of a large inn, I became fully conscious. I knew that my physical body was immobilized on my bed back in New York. Yet here I was, as awake and as conscious as I have ever been. I intuitively knew that if I could stop the activity of my mind, everything before me would freeze. No sooner was the thought born than the urge to try it possessed me. I felt my head tighten, then thicken to a stillness. My attention concentrated into a crystal clear focus, and the waitress walking walked not. And I looked through the window, and the leaves falling fell not, and the family of 4 eating ate not, and they lifting the food lifted it not. Then my attention relaxed, the tightness eased, and of a sudden all moved onward in their course. The leaves fell, the waitress walked, and the family ate. Then I understood Blake's vision of the sculptures of Los's halls. I sent you to reap that whereon you bestowed no labour. John 4:35. Creation is finished. I am the beginning and the end. There is nothing to come that has not been and is. Ecclesiastes 3:15, ER5. The world of creation is finished, and its original is within us. We saw it before we set forth, and since then we have been striving to remember it and to activate sections of it. There are infinite views of this creation. Our task is to grasp the right view and, through the determined direction of our attention, make it pass in procession before the inner eye. If we assemble the right sequence and experience it in imagination until it takes on the tone of reality, then we consciously create circumstances. This inner procession, the activity of imagination, must be consciously directed. Through a series of mental transformations, we become aware of greater portions of what already is. By aligning our mental activity with the portion of creation we desire to experience, we activate it, resurrect it, and give it life. This experience not only shows that the world is a manifestation of the mental activity of the individual observer, but also reveals that our journey through time consists of leaps of attention between eternal moments. An infinite abyss separates any two moments of ours. By the movement of our attention, we give life to the sculptures of Los's halls. Imagine the world as containing an infinite number of states of consciousness, each offering a unique view. Think of these states as rooms or mansions within the house of God, fixed relative to one another. Now imagine yourself, the real self, the imaginative you, as the living, moving occupant of this divine house. Each room contains some of Los's sculptures, complete with infinite plots, dramas, and situations already worked out, but not yet activated. They spring to life the moment human imagination enters and fuses with them. Each represents specific mental and emotional activities. To enter a state, a person must consent to the ideas and feelings it embodies. These states represent countless possible mental transformations that we can experience. To move into a new state or mansion requires a change in beliefs. Everything you could ever desire already exists, but must be matched by your beliefs to be activated and objectified. This alignment is the seeking that finds, the knocking to which the door is opened, the asking that receives. Enter and claim the land. The moment a person aligns their beliefs with those of a state, they fuse with it. This union activates and projects the state's plots, plans, dramas, and situations, making it the individual's home and point of view. It becomes their workshop, and if they are observant, they will see outer reality conforming to the model created by their imagination. It is for this purpose of training us in image making that we were subjected to the limitations of the senses and clothed in flesh. It is the awakening of the imagination, the return of his Son, that the Father awaits. The creature was made subject to vanity, not willingly, but by reason of him who subjected it. Romans 8:20. The victory of the Son, the return of the prodigal, assures us. The creature shall be delivered from the bondage of corruption into the glorious liberty of the sons of God. Romans 8:21. We were subjected to this earthly experience because no one can truly know imagination without enduring the vanities and limitations of the flesh. Without taking on sonship and venturing prodigally, without experimenting and tasting this cup of experience, confusion will persist until humanity awakens, restoring a fundamentally imaginative view of life as basic and supreme. I should preach the unsearchable riches of Christ and make all men see what is the fellowship of the mystery, which from the beginning of the world has been hid in God, who created all things by Jesus Christ. Ephesians 3:9. Christ in you is your imagination, and the world you perceive is shaped by the state of consciousness with which you are fused. This understanding empowers you to determine your destiny by consciously aligning your imagination with the ideals you wish to realize. The circumstances of your life reflect the states you occupy, and on this distinction rests the difference between success and stagnation. Man, though free to choose his state, often laments the consequences of his choices, crying out for deliverance from the very states he has embraced. As the scripture says, "And ye shall cry out in that day, because of your king which ye shall have chosen you, and the Lord will not hear you in that day." Nevertheless, the people refused to obey the voice of Samuel, and they said, "Nay, but we will have a king over us." 1 Samuel 8:18-19. Therefore, choose wisely the state you will serve, for all states are inert until imagination breathes life into them. All things, when they are admitted, are made manifest by the light, for everything that is made manifest is light. Ephesians 5:13. Ye are the light of the world. Matthew 5:14. By your light, your awareness, ideas take form and become visible. Hold steadfastly to your ideal, for it is yours alone unless surrendered by your imagination. To realize an ideal, do not merely think of it, think from it. The ideals from which you think are those that come to life. Man lives not by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. Matthew 4:4. The mouth of God is the mind of man. Be intentional with the ideas you eat and drink, for they shape your reality. Without a clear aim, your mind will wander, consuming negativity. Align your thoughts with your ideals, for living rightly mentally ensures that all else follows suit. A change in mental diet is essential to altering your life's course. Feeding on ideas of lack and limitation perpetuates the same experiences. To transform your world, shift your focus to ideals that align with your desires. If your reality remains unchanged, it indicates neglect of the new mental diet. Fidelity to your desired state requires consistency. The ideas and moods you entertain define your state of being. Train yourself to dwell in the feeling of your wish fulfilled, for this is the essence of creative magic. The feelings you frequently revisit become habitual, shaping your destiny. Assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled not sporadically but persistently, allowing it to permeate your actions and reactions. Do not merely think of your desired end. Think from it. Thinking from the end means uniting with it, fusing your imagination and being with the desired state. This is the key to manifestation. Imagine yourself already living your wish fulfilled. Immerse yourself in the feeling of its reality, and carry this feeling as a fragrant presence that subtly influences your life. A mood, when repeated, builds momentum and becomes challenging to break. Cultivate moods that resonate with your desires, for they reveal the state with which you are fused. The journey from thinking of your ideal to thinking from it involves centering your imagination in the feeling of its fulfillment. In doing so, you move beyond separation into unification. living and acting as though your wish is already realized. This practice of living in the feeling of the wish fulfilled transforms your imagination into the creator of your world, bringing to life the ideals you consistently nurture. Chapter 8. The Apple of God's Eye. What think ye of the Christ? Whose son is he? Matthew 20:2-42. When this question arises, let your response be bold and certain. Christ is my imagination. Though you may not yet see all things subject to this truth, recognize that you are Mary, destined to bring forth the Christ within. In time, through this awakening, you will affirm, I can do all things through Christ. The birth of Christ signifies the awakening of the inner man, the second man within you. It is the moment when you become conscious of the mental activity that has always existed within, operating whether or not you were aware. This awakening does not introduce something foreign into your being, nor does it create something that did not already exist. Instead, it is the unveiling of the divine presence, the Son of God, residing within. The Lord cometh in clouds. Revelation 1:7 describes the inner vision of pulsating golden light that manifests in the awakening individual. This coming is internal, not external, for Christ is within us. This great mystery, God was manifest in the flesh, 1 Timothy 3:16, begins with Advent, symbolizing the cleansing and preparation of the temple, for ye are the temple of God. 1 Corinthians 3:17. The kingdom of heaven, the divine presence, lies within you, waiting to be unveiled and expressed. Advent is the season of unveiling, a time to uncover the mystery of your being. To prepare for this awakening, practice the art of revision. Revise your life by aligning with wise, imaginative use of your inner speech and actions. Live with the confidence that through the conscious use of the power that worketh in us, Christ will awaken within you. Believe in this truth, trust it, and act upon it. Advent is not merely a season on the calendar. It is the unfolding realization that God is manifesting through you. When you embrace this, you will understand the profound mystery of God was manifest in the flesh. 1 Timothy 3:16. From this moment on, recognize that he that toucheth you toucheth the apple of God's eye. Zechariah 2:8. You are sacred, for the Christ within you is the power and wisdom of God, waiting to be expressed in every thought, word, and action. Thank you for listening.